Hey guys, welcome back to the final video in my healing series. Today, at long last, we're covering the Holy Priest. We'll look at what changes the spec has seen and how those changes affect the way we heal. As always, I'll start off with a brief overview. The Holy Priest is really your very archetypal healer. I don't want to call them basic, but rather a very traditional healer. They have good tools for both AoE healing and single target healing. They have some good raid and party cooldowns, but they lack in impactful defensives and will be weaker picks for higher Mythic Plus keys. They are also not known for their damage throughput, and really are strongest when they can just stand back and keep their team alive, and this is reflected in their mastery, which simply gives your direct healing spells an added healing over time component. So, with that very brief overview out of the way, let's start diving into their healing toolkit and rotation. Starting out with Renew, this is an instant cast healing over time effect that you'll want to keep active on your tank and can then start throwing out on other group members as needed when they start taking damage. Renew has no cooldown and will heal for a moderate amount over 15 seconds. Next, we have Prayer of Mending. This is yet another instant cast spell that we'll want to keep up on our tank. This will heal our tank for a small amount once they take any damage, and will then jump to another ally within 20 yards and do the same thing. This spell will jump like this 5 times and is on a baseline 12-second cooldown. It is affected by haste, and this means that by the time Prayer of Mending has finished its last jump, its 5th jump, we should have it back off cooldown to reapply to our tank again. For AoE healing, a smaller amount of group damage, we'll use Circle of Healing. This is an instant cast group heal on a short 15-second cooldown that's again affected by haste. This will heal our target and 4 other allies within 30 yards for a moderate amount. This used to be a talent and is now baseline, which is excellent. Next up, for smaller group heals, we have Prayer of Healing. This is a more expensive version of Circle of Healing, and again will heal our target and the 4 nearest allies within 30 yards. It just heals for slightly less. Prayer of Healing does have a long cast time, but it has no cooldown. Due to the cast time though, and the larger mana cost, we'll want to prioritize using Circle of Healing, especially if there's any kind of movement required, and then use Prayer of Healing if additional group healing is needed. For larger single target and AoE healing, we'll look at our Holy Word spells. These are a variety of powerful tools which all have a large impact and a correspondingly large cooldown. Starting with Holy Word Serenity, this is a very large single target heal. It's quite expensive, but it is instant cast and it has a 1-minute cooldown that can be reduced by 6 seconds every time you use heal or flash heal. Holy Word Sanctify is our very large AoE heal. This will heal 6 allies within 10 yards of your target for a substantial amount. This is again instant cast with a 1-minute cooldown, and similarly has its cooldown reduced by 6 seconds, this time when you use Prayer of Healing or Renew. You can realistically get the cooldowns for both Serenity and Sanctify down to around 30-36 seconds or so quite comfortably, with Sanctify being the easier cooldown to reduce since we shave off 6 seconds every time we use that instant cast Renew. We will, in general, want to keep both of these Holy Word spells on cooldown as much as possible. We have one other baseline Holy Word spell, but I will cover that in the utility section. Also worth briefly mentioning in this section is the Power Word Shield, which is baseline for all priests. This is an instant cast damage absorption shield that we can place on allies, with no cooldown outside of the Weakened Soul effect. This is simply a debuff that prevents us from shielding the same ally twice within 7.5 seconds. This is something that you can keep up on your tank to help mitigate incoming damage, but unlike the Disc Priest, you don't particularly want to keep this up on all party members since it's a little expensive for us, and we also have Renew as a healing over time that should suffice. So to summarize, keep Renew and Prayer of Mending up on your tank. Throw out a Renew on other party members as they start taking damage. Spot heal individual members with flash heal, or heal if you can afford the longer cast time. And for smaller AoE healing, use Circle of Healing for an instant cast group heal, and then Prayer of Healing if more AoE healing is needed after that. For larger single target heals, use your Holy Word Serenity. And for larger AoE heals, use your Holy Word Sanctify. And that wraps up the bulk of the Holy Priest healing rotation. Moving on to damage, I won't go much into our damage spells and rotations since we don't use them to heal our allies the way the Disc Priest does. I will instead just highlight a few abilities. Shadow Word Pain is our instant cast dot which we would like to keep up on enemies as much as possible. Holy Fire is a harder hitting dot with some added upfront damage. This has a cast time and a 10-second cooldown, and again we would like to use this off cooldown, assuming that we're allowed to. Smite is our standard filler damage spell with no cooldown, and we'll want to dump this into priority damage targets, again, situations permitting, meaning our group isn't dying and we have the freedom to stand casting damage spells. We also have access to Holy Nova as an instant cast, very small AoE damage and healing spell that we should only use when needed during very high movement fights. And that wraps up our baseline rotational spells, and we can now move into cooldowns. The Holy Priest has an interesting mix here. Starting with our large raid cooldowns, we have Divine Hymn. This is a channeled spell that will heal all party and raid members within 40 yards for a large amount over 7 seconds. And will then further increase our healing done to them by 10% for another 8 seconds. This is on a 3-minute cooldown and will heal for 100% more if used in a party as opposed to a raid. This is a cooldown that again we really want to use in conjunction with other healer cooldowns when in raids to mitigate large damage mechanics coming into our group. Next up for raid cooldowns we have Symbol of Hope. This is a mana regeneration cooldown. This will restore 2% mana for all healers in our raid every second for 4.5 seconds on a very long 5-minute cooldown. This should ideally again be organized ahead of time in some way to ensure its maximum value. Next, I suppose this would be as good a place as any to mention one of our passives, Spirit of Redemption. This allows us to continue healing in spirit form for 15 seconds if we die. This has niche uses, but occasionally can be game-winning in a PvP situation or group-saving in a raid or Mythic Plus situation. This isn't strictly a cooldown, but I wasn't sure where else to put it, so we're sticking it here. Next up is our only throughput cooldown in Power Infusion. This will increase haste by 25% for 20 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. We can choose to either give this to our big dick DPS during a much needed damage push, or we can use this on ourselves to help push out faster heals during a larger damage mechanic. For defensive cooldowns, as mentioned in the overview, we sadly have very little. Desperate Prayer is our personal defensive CD. This will increase our max HP by 25% for 10 seconds and instantly heal us for that amount on a 1.5-minute cooldown. This is fine, but we would of course prefer a defensive that actually reduced incoming damage. Our only other defensive is an interesting one. Guardian Spirit is something we can apply to an ally, making it an external. We will usually give this to our tank during a very scary high damage situation, and this Guardian will increase all healing received for that tank by 60% for 10 seconds. The interesting part of this Guardian spell is that it will prevent the tank from dying, instead sacrificing the Guardian Spirit. It's important to note here that this will not save a tank from a straight one-shot mechanic. However, if the Guardian does sacrifice itself by preventing our tank from dying, it will heal the tank, or whichever ally we gave it to, for 40% of their max HP, and at that point the effect of this CD would be over. This is really best used in raids where we have other healers to provide actual damage mitigation CDs, and our Guardian could then be used simply as a way to help stabilize our tank, since they get that massive healing received buff for 10 seconds. With cooldowns now covered, let's talk about some of our utility options. I'm not going to cover every single thing that could possibly be considered utility. I'm instead going to focus on the most powerful and most commonly used abilities. So let's start with our Holy Word spell that I mentioned earlier, Holy Word Chastise. This is a baseline single target incapacitate effect on a 1-minute cooldown. It deals some upfront damage, which is nice, and its cooldown, like all other Holy Word spells, can again be reduced by 6 seconds, this time by casting Smite. This has some usefulness in PvP, as well as solo content, and perhaps the odd pack here and there in Mythic Plus. Although it should be noted that since this is an incapacitate effect and not a stun, the effect will be broken if the target takes damage, and even if the effect is not broken by damage, it only lasts for 4 seconds. Dispel Magic is a purge type effect, which will remove one beneficial magic effect from an enemy, and Purify is of course our baseline dispel effect for friendly targets, removing all magic and disease effects every 8 seconds. Psychic Scream is our AoE Fear on a 1-minute cooldown. This will mostly be used in PvP or solo content, as it is not advisable to use this in dungeons, and there will be very few enemies in raids that can be feared. Power Word Fortitude is baseline for all priests and something I completely forgot to mention in my Disc Priest guide. This is simply a party and raid buff which will increase everyone's stamina by 5% for 1 hour. Mind Control again is baseline for all priests and again will likely only be used in PvP. Mass Dispel is an AoE dispel effect on a 45-second cooldown. This will remove all harmful magic effects from 5 allies and 1 beneficial magic effect from 5 enemies. This will have limited but still powerful uses. Levitate is baseline for all priests and will allow a friendly target to slow fall and float above the ground or water. And Leap of Faith is our last utility ability. We can grab an ally and pull them to us on a 1.5-minute cooldown. You can either use this to save an ally, or, if you're clever, you can use this to kill them, or otherwise inconvenience them. And that concludes the majority of our baseline toolkit, so let's jump into our talents. Our talent tree is split for Mythic Plus and raids with almost no crossover. For row 15, we'll take Enlightenment in raids to help with our mana regen, and we'll take Trail of Light in Mythic Plus for some added healing with Flash Heal. For row 25, most priests will prefer the flexibility of Angelic Feathers, but for more casual content, Body and Soul is a little easier to use. For row 30, we'll take Cosmic Ripple for raids. This will add a small AoE heal every time we use Holy Word Serenity or Sanctify. In Mythic Plus for this row, we would instead prefer Guardian Angel, which will reduce the cooldown of our Guardian Angel CD by 1 minute if it didn't sacrifice itself. This of course is needed since again Guardian Angel is our only external CD to help our tank in Mythic Plus. Row 35 is for crowd control, so take what will be most useful to you, although again, in Mythic Plus we'll want to take Shining Force for the flexibility of having an AoE knockback and slow. For row 40, we'll take Prayer Circle in raids for the Prayer of Healing cast time reduction, while in Mythic Plus we tend to prefer Surge of Light for free, instant cast flash heal procs. For row 45, Halo is a given for raids since it heals in a very large radius, but in Mythic Plus, Halo would likely cause us to pull the entire dungeon, so we'll forego that and instead take Divine Star for an easy, instant cast but more manageable AoE heal and damage effect on a short 15-second cooldown. Our final talent row will take Holy Word Salvation for high AoE damage situations in raids to give us an additional AoE CD. This will put out a decent chunk of AoE healing, and then we'll coat everyone healed in our Renew and 2 stacks of Prayer of Mending. This has a very long base cooldown of 12 minutes, but its CD is reduced by 30 seconds every time you use a Holy Word healing spell. If the raid fight does not have a lot of AoE damage to deal with, we'll take Apotheosis instead, which will also be our go-to pick for Mythic Plus. Apotheosis will immediately reset the cooldowns of all your Holy Word spells and will also increase the cooldown reduction of all Holy Word spells by 300% It will then reduce the mana cost by 100%. This effect will last for 20 seconds on a reasonable 2-minute cooldown. Taking Apotheosis does change gameplay a bit, since you'll want to make sure you're using your Holy Word spells off cooldown, and certainly you'll want to use them right before you use Apotheosis, so that you get maximum benefit from that cooldown reset. And now with talents done, let's finish up by looking at the legendary effects coming for priests in Shadowlands, and which are looking strongest for us. In general, the two we're most likely to take are Harmonious Apparatus and Divine Image. Harmonious Apparatus will cause some added synergy with Holy Word cooldowns, and we will prefer this in raids when we're taking Holy Word Salvation. This will cause Circle of Healing to reduce the CD of Sanctify, Prayer of Mending to reduce the cooldown of Serenity, and Holy Fire to reduce the cooldown of Chastise by 4 seconds. This is a much needed effect in those situations where raids needs us to take that Salvation talent. For Mythic Plus, or raids where we take the Apotheosis talent, we will instead choose Divine Image. This will give us a chance to summon a Naru fellow for 15 seconds, each time we use a Holy Word spell. While this Naru is active, he will cast similar spells to whatever we're casting. Since Apotheosis means that we will have our Holy Word cooldowns back faster and more frequently, we'll get the most benefit out of this legendary when taking that talent. For honorable mentions, I'll include Twins of the Sun Priestess and Zanshi. Twins is cool for less dangerous group content, where we want both our DPS carry and ourselves to benefit from our mini Bloodlust power infusion effect every 2 minutes. On the other end of the spectrum, Zanshi might be considered in extremely dangerous content, like very high Mythic Plus keys, where we think we might be one-shot, since this will allow us to instantly resurrect with 100% HP after our passive Spirit of Redemption ends if we die. On the whole, I think it's not wise to bank on dying, but I thought I would mention this option anyways. And now with our legendaries covered, that wraps up this healing guide for the Holy Priest. I hope you guys found it helpful and informative. Drop me a like and a sub if you like my content, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!